And now we are joined by Lola Shonaike.
Hi there. I appreciate the clapping. That was great.
Hi, yeah.
Lola, that was great. So
thank you. Yeah, Lola, you are a software engineer at Raytheon Technologies, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Perfect. And your talk today is called "What in the World is GraphQL?" I also want to know what in the world is GraphQL? Well, here in the blurb, it says it's a syntax that describes how to ask for data and is generally used to load data from a server to a client. And it lets the client specify exactly what data it needs. Wow. Okay. So I am ready to learn more. Take it away, Lola.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead here and share my screen. Oh, okay. Well, that works too. Hold on. Is my screen?
We can't see it yet.
You should be able to present now.
Okay, there we go. So today my talk is on what in the world is GraphQL. Before I jump into that, a little heads up about me. My name is Lola Shonaike. I work as primarily an API developer at, they used to be called United Technologies, and then we got merged to Raytheon, but I still list the subdivision in case anyone's curious. I have this picture of Iron Man because I like to think I'm a wannabe Iron Man. Tony Stark is my hero, and at work they call me Spicy Lola or Great Value because I make jokes that I think are funny and nobody laughs. So for today's agenda, we're going to talk about what is GraphQL, why we currently use GraphQL at my job, how we implemented it, and I'm going to show you kind of a brief challenge info of what GraphQL looks like. So what is GraphQL? Is it a buzzword, graphing database, Twitter wars? I don't know about you guys, but when I first heard about GraphQL, I was on Twitter just watching people argue about GraphQL was going to replace people in API who had a RESTful API career. And I was like, oh no, I jumped on the bandwagon, like, I don't like GraphQL either. But actually, so at my current job, for the problems we needed to solve, it actually turned out it was a really good fit. So what is GraphQL? It's a data query language and manipulation for your API. So if you've ever worked with SQL or databases before, what makes it really cool is instead of writing this traditional REST or for mechanism, you kind of write this like query-like language to get back your data. It was originally developed by Facebook because they needed a way to handle passing of that information. You know, Facebook is huge between its mobile and its web browser. So before I get deep into the weeds of GraphQL, at a higher level, it probably makes sense first to explain what the client-server architecture model. So if you go on Facebook, Instagram, any form of social media, that data is actually coming from a thing called the server, and your client will request that data, will send a request like, hey, I want, if you're on Facebook and you're like, I want to look at puppies or certain memes, they'll send a request, hey, I want to look at these certain puppies, and the server will send back a response like, these are the cute little puppies. So I put that visual, hopefully that explains some of that. I also put another meme because I feel like this better explains it. So the client, going back to that client server architecture, so the client would be the front end, kind of this beautiful model you see at the front, and the back end is the dragon. So my job primarily is working as the dragon so that you guys get that data from whether or not be Facebook or Instagram in a meaningful way to you. As you can see, the user is very happy, and I'm just stuck there in the back as a dragon. So going back to, so before GraphQL, there is traditionally with API development and HTTP RESTful APIs. Usually, like I said, it has what they have an endpoint URL. So if you kind of look here and see this HTTPS, I pulled an example from Uber's API. So if you guys have ever rode an Uber, this is an API example of pulling the data of showing you what it looks like to estimate how much it's going to cost for you to go somewhere. So it usually has an endpoint URL. It has headers, like you can see this, keeps clicking, like the start latitude, longitude of where you are and all that good stuff. And usually with an HTTP REST API, you can either get information, create information, update, delete, and there's patch, which is like a halfway update. So we had RESTful APIs, but at my job, which I should have probably went into more depth at Raytheon, what we do is prediction analytics for various things in aerospace engineering. So we just had a lot of stuff that we had to predict and do, and it just wasn't very efficient to do this RESTful API. So the best metaphor I can give is RESTful API versus GraphQL in terms of grabbing data. So you can think of RESTful API as a pre-packed made sandwich at Starbucks, like the sandwich is what you see, what you get, versus Subway would be GraphQL, where instead of it being a pre-made sandwich, I kind of am a Subway artisan who turns the data into many toppings so you can make the sandwich that you specifically need. So with a RESTful API, if you get a sandwich with cheese, you're stuck with cheese. You have to remove the cheese yourself. But with GraphQL, because it's a query-like language, you can fetch specifically what you need. So other benefits is API is a schema, not an endpoint. So like I said, you're not stuck in a defined sandwich. It's queryable, so you can literally only ask for the data that you're concerned about. As a client, if I decide, as you see on this left here, I don't want this bacon, cheese, and like potato sandwich, I want steak with bacon and cheese, I can specifically ask for that. And there's no waste of resources with RESTful APIs. Like I said, because you're stuck with the original sandwich, you can get more ingredients in the sandwich than you want or less ingredients in the sandwich than you want. And you could think of the sandwich as data. So how we implemented it at work, we use Python. GraphQL is actually most popular with JavaScript, but because we're a machine learning shop, we actually went ahead and implemented it in Python for some of our microservices, so it'd be seamless. We used Graphene, which is a GraphQL library for Python. We did it because there wasn't a lot of overhead. Like I could write basically like in a traditional Python syntax way without having to like specifically dig into the weeds of GraphQL's own specific code like language. Also it supports SQL Alchemy, which is a really popular object relational mapper with Python, and it was built in with Django and Flask. It had supporting libraries, which Django and Flask are very popular web frameworks with Python. And here I just put some things like queries, a get resolver. So back to that HTTP REST where you would have the get, post, put, delete. In GraphQL, you only have what they call queries and mutations. So query is getting the data, mutation is you change the data, and put, post, deletes kind of like fall under it. So before I dive to questions, I actually was going to show a live demo of showing a queryable GraphQL. So I'm going to exit out of this browser. So here, what I have already pre-set up for this demo is what's really cool about GraphQL, it's already built in, is on the side, you can see like the docs for what you can query. So you can already kind of look at the date, like what data you can get. So here, what I did was I made an events roles users. You can see what you can filter on. You can more filter stuff. If I click specifically in here, And the edges and nodes is like specific to Facebook. I can query ID, name, created by description user. So with the RESTful API, traditionally, if I said these were all the fields, unless I would be specifically stuck with the sandwich. But with GraphQL, I can just query specifically like what I need. So maybe I don't want created by, maybe I just want ID. Another really cool thing is, I'm gonna go ahead and grab users here, is it also supports nested objects depending on how you build the schema. So as you can see in here, users is separate. Sorry, one second. Okay, let me retype it. Users is a separate data entity, but I can actually also query for that events I just showed you in users with the ID. So I'm going to go ahead and get some data for events under user. And then what I'm also going to get is some user information, like I want email, ID, and so it shows me now for every user, it can show me the different events. Maybe I only want description, I don't care about ID. And that's the basic gist of it. And then with mutations, it kind of follows the same thing where you just basically create new data and it once again lists the fields. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions? And that's my Twitter.
Okay, thank you, Lola. I actually do have a very pressing question, just because I still don't know what in the world GraphQL is, but I'd love to know what your favorite Subway sandwich is.
My favorite Subway sandwich would have to be a sweet onion chicken teriyaki with olives and honey mustard and basically pretty much all the vegetables, but specifically extra olives.
Nice. You can probably hear that I'm not actually from the US, but whenever I do go to the US, we always tend to take quite long road trips, and my my road trip favorite is actually stopping off at a Subway. So just curious for the next time. For the next time I'm there, if you have any other inspiring toppings, you can put them in the chat box. I do have a question here. It says, I have used GraphQL with Gatsby mostly, and I'm not sure how fragment works. Are they only shortcuts to get specific attributes?
Ooh, so I unfortunately have not worked with fragments.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, we're all here to learn.
Honesty, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I have another question here. Is GraphQL just another REST implementation?
No, so they're separate in that REST, you are bound to following kind of a HTTP where it's a request response, but you specify the endpoint and then you would specify the HTTP verb action like get, post, put, update. Whereas with GraphQL, you don't necessarily follow a RESTful architecture. What you're doing is you're turning your data into entities itself. So REST is like what you see is what you get. GraphQL is more of you're turning your data and resources into queryable items. Like you can think of GraphQL as turning your API into like a SQL database.
Okay, if I'm honest, I would rather talk about software toppings. This is like way over my head, but I'm sure all the other attendees are loving this and learning a lot. We have Patricia who is asking, does GraphQL work with relational databases or just for non-relational databases?
So it actually works with both. So it doesn't matter. GraphQL, you would write the layer on top. So the example I just showed you was actually with a relational database. Under the hood, we have the GraphQL resolvers that would write back to SQL Alchemy, and we were using a PostgreSQL database. But I have worked with doing it in Mongo as well as GraphQL. You can even have it go to a file, any data resources. It's kind of what you decide to write your GraphQL resolver functions to do.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Lola? Please drop them into our chat box. I have one here as well that says, hey, have you ever tried implementing Gatsby on a legacy system where it relies heavily on certain old formats like SOAP or XML RPC? Any ideas on how you would tackle such formatting issues?
With Gatsby? So I haven't worked with Gatsby, but I can answer the SOAP XML RPC question. So specifically for the RPC question, what we did was we used, if you want to look it up, it's called gRPC. It's Google's kind of own version of RPC, and we moved some of our RPC stuff to support that. As far as the XML stuff goes, I'm guessing my question is returning stuff in that format. We did a wonky way where we would return the XML, we would return the XML data kind of still in a JSON string. But I don't know if that necessarily, I would need more clarity on that question.
Tiffany is asking, can the link to the example please be posted in the chat?
Yeah, so if you, is my screen still, if you go to toc-python.herokuapp.com, you should be able to play around with.
Ooh, I think you might have to write that for us, Lola. I wouldn't want to make any mistakes on that. If you could write that into the chat box.
Yes, hold on one second. Let me
Wonderful, thank you. And would anybody else like to ask Lola something? We have her with us for a couple of minutes. Please take advantage of this amazing opportunity to ask some questions from our expert here. Perfect, thank you, Lola.
Thank you.
I don't think I would have been able to write that. I can also see from your bio that you have also been a programming mentor. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that? Do you still do a bit of mentoring?
Yeah, so I currently am in Atlanta, and I am a tech lead at Technologists of Color, and we're hopefully in the process of starting a more formal process. But what has kind of happened with me volunteering there, I've had people ask to be mentees. So I am taking mentees, and what I do is try to shape them into careers in tech, kind of specifically in web development, if they're interested in going down a career path in backend and DevOps, because that's kind of where my experience is. So yeah. And then I also do from time to time volunteer with Girls Who Code. I haven't recently been able to do much of anything because a lot of the events we had were in person. So we would do like hands-on workshops and things like that.
And if one were to reach out to you for any kind of mentoring, what's the best way to find you? Would it be LinkedIn or or any other place where we can come and find you, Lola?
I would say you can LinkedIn, but I would say Twitter. I check Twitter probably more than I check my phone or anything. If you mention me or shout me, that's usually how I get them. I'm in many Slack channels, but I would say Twitter would probably be you can through LinkedIn, but LinkedIn, I am bombarded by tech recruiters. So I usually have to shuffle through.
So could you please share with us what your Twitter address is? I think I saw it. I think it was Spicy Lola or something like that, right?
Great name. Yeah, it's a nickname I got from one of my older jobs because I would name my feature branches kind of a variation of the feature ticket I was working on, and then after Peppers, and then it just stuck.
So is it just Spicy Lola, or was there an underscore or something? Let's put it in the chat box as well.
Spicy, so yeah, it's Spicy_ Lola. Okay, I can put that in the chat as well.
Great, and that way we'll definitely find you and follow you and see what you're up to. Any exciting projects that you're working on at the moment that you'd like to tell us a little bit about?
So right now I think the most exciting project is I am trying to start, like I said, I'm a tech lead at Text2Color. We're trying to have I'm trying to start a formal mentoring process. Because we right now kind of have where people will come and then they will just ask like, oh, be a mentee mentor. And my hope is once everything really opens back up again and it's safe, like we could have like informal brunches and kind of create this comfortable environment for people to learn, for not only to build relationships, but, you know, to learn in a fun, more exciting environment, like kickstarting career in tech, like whiteboard interviews and such like that.
But you are organizing kind of virtual workshops as well? I mean, for those of us who aren't in Atlanta.
Yeah, so Text2Color, we usually have a few events per month. Specifically, the ones I'm in charge of is an event called Coding While Black, where we teach a different topic in tech. So one of our most recent ones was we did unit testing. We did one on like database normalization. Our next upcoming one, I'm actually not the lead on that one, but I'm just helping volunteering where we're talking about how to efficiently render pages on the browser and best JavaScript practices. But we usually have different guest speakers. Like we've had people from Facebook, Deloitte, Amazon, JetBrains. So it's cool too, because you get a smaller intimate access to some of the people in those companies and some power players, but yeah.
Amazing. Well, if nobody else has any questions, I'm giving you guys 10 seconds to raise your hand. See if there's any more questions for Lola. And if not, well, I would really like to thank you for your time this afternoon, Lola. Thank you for participating in our Diversity Reboot 2020 Virtual Summit. We really do appreciate your time. I definitely have learned something today. I don't know if I'll be ready to use GraphQL anytime soon, but have a little bit more of a clearer idea. So don't know if you have any parting words or any advice for us.
No, just thank you so much for taking the time to hear it out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lola.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone who participated in our engineering track. We are going to be closing the engineering track for today.